Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Our panel, patriotic and distinguished careers, and we all appreciate the great work you're doing. Let me say, first of all, that I get what you're saying, $465 billion in cuts that you're barely able to swallow, and now we're talking about plussing that up to maybe a full $1 trillion over 10 years. And that takes us from a high-risk level to a very dangerous level, and certainly I get that. That's precisely why I voted against the Budget Control Act, because I knew we would be here today talking about these problems. My first question is for you, General Schwartz. We've talked a number of times in hearings and offline, and I understand that there's a decision that's been made not to initially certify the new long-range strike bomber for nuclear operations, and that Air Combat Command, not Global Strike Command, which was newly stood up, I think, only a couple of years ago, will be the lead major command on the program. Can you please explain in detail the rationale behind these two decisions? Obviously, I'm concerned about a de-emphasis on the nuclear role. And again, let me kind of add in that with all these risks involved, that obviously makes this world a more dangerous place. But the one area where there's no tolerance for risk is in the area of nuclear weapons. So explain that and give us an idea about that rationale, sir.
We certainly agree with that there's no tolerance for error in that business. There's two aspects to this, Congressman. One is that the airplane will be dual capable. It will be both nuclear capable and it will be a conventional long-range strike platform as well. The logic is to design and to build the airplane to perform the nuclear mission. This will not be backed in later. This will be done in the design and build process, but not to certify immediately. And the reason is that we're trying to control cost. Part of that is controlling how elaborate your test process is. And we are going to phase this in a way that will initially introduce conventional capability, which is easier to test, less costly to test. And then as we get closer to the time when the B-52 and the B-2 begin to age out, we will, well in advance of that, certify the airplane for nuclear operations. Again, it will have the internals, and all that's required. We simply won't do the test and certification, which is quite elaborate and includes electromagnetic pulse and so on, until a little bit later in the sequence. And we think that's the prudential thing to do to bring in this platform on cost and on time. With respect to who's in charge, I'm in charge. The Secretary of the Air Force is in charge. The fact is Air Combat Command is the lead command because they have the acquisition and requirements capacity in their headquarters. As you know, Global Strike is still somewhat new and will acquire that capability over time. But the idea was to give this to the command that had the capacity right now, and will certainly think about when the time comes, you know, who's the daddy rabbit for the platform.
Sure. Okay, thank you, General. I may come back to you. General Odierno, I have a question for you, sir. Is it true that certain requirements, like the Army's longstanding need for additional land to support full-spectrum training operations, will require further resources in this constrained budget environment? For example, do you believe that the ongoing range expansion at the JRTC at Fort Polk is a mission-critical initiative, even as the Army draws down its forces and alters its mix of units?
Congressman, as we draw down and as we come out of Afghanistan and other places, it's imperative that we continue to improve our jewels of our training programs, which is the National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center, and CMTC in Europe, and make them the most capable and qualified so we are able to prepare ourselves for the upcoming threats, what they might be, and so we can properly train our soldiers. And so it is a very important part of our program. It will be reviewed like we review everybody else as we look at these budget cuts, but it's something that we set a high priority on.
As you know, Fort Polk already has money set aside for land acquisition, and that seems to be moving forward, although it's been slower than expected. So you feel that that still is going to be a very important part of the future?
I believe that our training complex, especially JRTC, are very important, and that they will have a high priority as we do our review of our budget.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. My time is up, and I yield back.
Thank you, Doctor. And we